question
basically
stuff,
like,
but
we want information from all these
often some questions
knowledge.
I'll ask just what I think the community want to know.
Exciting.
You
And
know,
how long
'cause
does it take?
straight away there'll be a few people in the community going, okay,
Tech on 6
how does that work?
Oh, young lady.
But it's just easy to
Yeah.
They're all fluffy.
I grew up in Hastings. I trained, I did a BA.
In the last
And we've got I wrote having it
Went in Zimbabwe for 3 years and then came back to New Zealand. I've actually
I just, I mean, I usually say
32 years ago. It's based in very yeah, and I've had some really good so it's been the longest job I've had.
it's good. You can draw it all back up.
Yeah. And I always ask about that. But I really like to, you know, understand what I'm
So
doing.
our last
And I
council,
feel
the word that I was selling
on the street.
This one we
Without
are
knowing
and that swayed.
Calling your team.
That's what you said when you came in. Look at what, look at what we saw from the outside. When you ran for council,
Oh yes, you're
look at what you were
yeah,
looking
that
at.
was why. That's why I.
Were they a bunch of it?
Oh, absolutely.
See, I was there. Don't know names. But this is what the community saw.
Oh, it's not really. It was just perception, wasn't it? And then once you get in, and you get to know people.
Just work out what ones were. And a few of them left, so. And they were very good. It's good now. Good year.
Yeah,
I mean, the fight to get someone a new one, the first one.
Yeah, that's right.
Even the room then was.
Right, welcome back everybody. We will move it on with our public excluded agenda. We don't have any apologies. Are there any conflicts of interest? There's no announcements from me. Any minor matters? Announcements by management?
Yes, I'd like to have an audience with the councillors, with myself and the deputy CE only, please, at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. There's no confirmation of minutes, so we'll move into our agenda items. And first up, we have the Creative Communities Funding, September 2022. And do we have anyone talking to this one, or is it, we don't have Belinda with us, do we? I think it is relatively self-explanatory. Who are our committee members? Thank you. Councillor Crystal, did you have any comments that you'd like to make on this?
I think we had some good new applicants, which is good, and we didn't actually give out all the funding, so because basically we didn't have enough people applying. Wow. So looking next time to get more people to apply for that funding for events and stuff. So yeah, there is the carryover will mean we'll have a bit more to work with for groups. So call out to the public if you've got a great idea in the arts, which is a wide range of things. Apply to our funds.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Councillor Crown.
Thank you. Through the chair. Hopefully you can answer this, Rhonda. And it is me being slightly nosy, but because of the fact that there was remaining funding, I was wondering, was Larissa Kellett did it not meet the criteria? Because in the list, it's the only thing that appears not to have received
What was
funding.
her?
Women of the 1960s or something? Women of the 60s.
Yeah, it didn't. It didn't.
Oh.
Yeah, there was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, nosy. Yeah.
Any further questions?
Just a question, Madam Mayor. When will this come out into the public arena?
We can include in the resolution for this to come out
Thank you.
straight after the meeting. Yep. Okay, so our recommendation is to receive the public excluded minutes of the Napier Creative Communities Scheme Assessment Committee held on 26 September. Note the following Napier Creative Communities funding decisions, and if we could just add a C to move the paper into open.
It's there, but it's under the
Oh, is it?
table, sorry. Under the table,
Oh,
It's part of it.
okay, now my computer's decided not to work. So it's already there, excellent. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Gregg, seconded by councillor Crystal. Did you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks.
Councillor Crystal? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And then moving on to the Community Services Grants Subcommittee nominations for 2022. And welcome to Sonas.
So, Madam Chair, I expected Belinda to be here, but the next time she would be here. So it's a very, I think it's a very straightforward report, and it is as recommended.
Thank you, Thunis. And yes, I think it is a relatively straightforward report and some great committee member nominations here for us to endorse today. Councillor Price.
Just one question on Carl Goodchild, Captain Carl.
Yes.
What are you getting it for?
He's not.
He wasn't
not.
one. He
He's not
wasn't one of
successful.
the selected.
Oh, he was? Oh,
No.
well, it just came out and... big
Jumped
white-
out at you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Triggered.
Triggered me.
I was just happy to move the officer's recommendation for you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Do I have a seconder? Oh, I've got a question.
I've just got one question. Yeah, can one of the committee, our two councillors answer? The people that got on is different to the people highlighted in the actual report or the kind of CV, so to speak. Can I get I just noticed there that Saeed Iqbal was actually selected there. Can I just get an understanding about what's that,
Yeah.
please?
Councillor Bogie, you're able to assist?
Councillor Taylor and I met with Belinda and her assistant to go through the people who have been nominated, and it was great. We had a really good selection, including I think 3 out of the 4 previous members, and all of whom would have been great, we knew, but we decided to select one of the previous members, and that was Jay Lamburn. We looked very closely at the CVs and what we knew about the other candidates, and I believe we chose the best people and the most appropriate one, but it was great to have such a broad selection of people wanting to be on this committee. Does that answer your question, Councillor Mawson?
Yep,
I'm
that's-
happy to. You've said that is highlighted, and it's not consistent with the names that were actually recommended.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
initially, and this is public excluded obviously, where he was a recommendation. However, we did further investigation and changed our recommendation, and all that's happened is that the report has not been modified to highlight Russell Jaggard, who was selected.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Could I ask, because part of the resolution is to move this into open, that we just make that correction before we do so, just so that there's no confusion in the community?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just on that, I'm just curious of the technicality of it. When we move, so the recommendation is to let the successful nominations know. Is that different to moving the full report into public?
Point
Or
B
is
is
it the same?
essentially moving the full report into public.
Right, so that is what that does. It's not that they just I'm probably splitting hairs, but I'm just interested in how it turns out. Like, does point B, does that infer that this report is then public, or does it infer that they will get a letter?
just their names. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good point. But just noting, I guess, that just for our internal records, if we could still ensure that correction's made. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Is it appropriate for us to list all the nominees, or the recommendation says note the successful nominees will be made public, and I assume the others notified? They will be notified that they have been successful. Yes, but is it necessary to make public the whole list of people who know? Thank
Successful.
you.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation.
Okay. So we have Deputy Mayor Brosnan moving that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Did you wish to speak to that?
Was just going to endorse the recommendations that we've received from the two members. Thank you. I know from my time working on this committee a few terms back, I believe Jay was there at the time and she was very capable. And I think you've come to a good list. So, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Say no.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Thunis. And next we have the Hawke's Bay Airport Limited appointment of director, and Jess.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we have one director, Sarah Park, who is coming to the end of her term at Hawke's Bay Airport. And obviously, as shareholders, we are responsible for running the process for the appointment of a new director. Bruce Allen and I ran this process together. He's the Group Manager of Corporate Services at Hastings District Council, so we ran an ad online, and we received a good response to the ad. So we ran a shortlisting process, and the Hastings and Napier mayors interviewed a shortlisted number of candidates for the directors. So I think the paper's quite comprehensive in terms of providing an overview of those candidates. I think it's just worth pointing out that it is a very small board of directors for the airport, so it's really important that the applicant's skill set is complementary to those who are already sitting, and we did take that into account when we put forward the shortlist. So we did go through quite a thorough process in terms of the shortlist that we put forward, ensuring that those skills were complementary to those who are already sitting. So we did take that into account, but I'm happy to take any questions on the candidate who has been suggested for recommendation, and I think that Kirsten's probably able to answer questions as well. So I wasn't able to attend the interviews, but Kirsten was present at the interview, so she's probably able to provide more detail than me on the successful candidate.
Yeah, absolutely happy to provide some feedback on the interviews themselves. We did have very high calibre shortlist of the four that we interviewed, and it would be fair to say that Darren Cusack was quite a standout, predominantly due to his extensive aviation experience, but alongside that his governance experience and other roles that he has held, and definitely felt that in terms of complementing the skills and experience of the existing board members, that he, both Sandra and I agreed, was the obvious choice. So he was very impressive. So open for any questions.
I'll probably talk to the second paper at the same time, if you like, in terms of the REM, or do you want to pass the recommendations for this one first and then move on?
Oh, we'll pass that and then move on to the next one. So do I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Price. Did you wish to speak to that?
Impressive CV.
Councillor Price?
Yeah, I think looking at these descriptions, you've probably got the best one.
Any other speakers? So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And yes, now we have the Director Remuneration Report.
Yeah, so this one is, obviously follows the previous paper. So the remuneration for the directors of Hawke's Bay Airport has been set relatively low, and this is regulated by public sector remuneration because it is a council-controlled organisation. And yeah, just I guess following those comments, it is a small board, so there is, yeah, they are doing some fairly heavy lifting in terms of the expectations of the directors of the board. And this has been approved by Treasury in terms of the recommendation for the increase of the remuneration of the directors, and I think it aligns with sort of commercial expectations, and I think it's benchmarked now probably more relative with commercial expectations. So I support the recommendations, and I think it's probably an appropriate remuneration for the directors and the chair.
Thank you, Jess, and I concur with everything you've said. Yeah, they do a huge amount of work, with them only being 4 of them on the board. So, any questions? I'm happy to move from the chair. Thank you, Councillor Crown, for seconding. And yeah, I don't think I need to make any more comments. They're a great team, and they certainly work hard for what's probably, I think, not really enough for the amount of work they do. So, any other speakers? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Jess. So moving on to the reports from the Audit and Risk Committee, PX, and we've got 3 items here, insurance arrangements, legal update and draft annual report 21-22. I think it probably is worth having some sort of update on the draft annual report, Richard. Did we want to, in terms of, because we did end up having a different set of recommendations come through from the Audit and Risk Committee, so yeah, great.
We might do a bit of a tag team update here. So we'll give you an update on the adoption of the annual report. So it was anticipated that the annual report would be adopted today, so it's with disappointment that we're not adopting the annual report today. So I would just like firstly to thank the finance team for predominantly the huge amount of effort and work that goes into the annual report in terms of the compiling of the financial statements. So the team, led by Caroline, had done a huge amount of work and got the annual report to a place where we thought we were going to be ready to adopt today. Unfortunately, the auditors came back to us last week, right before the Audit and Risk Committee, with an issue in terms of the asset valuation of our 3 water infrastructure assets. And it was their view that the assets were undervalued, and so they have raised that as an issue that needs to be addressed. We did have some options to consider in terms of whether we have a full revaluation of the assets or whether we just receive a modified audit opinion. Even if we received the modified audit opinion, we wouldn't have been able to receive that in time to adopt the annual report today. So they were the options that were put in front of us last week. And yeah, unfortunately, the auditor effectively, in our view, looked at the annual report too late and was basically unable to provide us that, that information early enough for us to actually make a decision to be able to adopt within the legislative time frame. So that's really been disappointing and really disappointing in terms of our relationship with Audit New Zealand, because we met with them sort of a few weeks ago and we were provided information that everything kind of looked on track and there were no significant issues or surprises that were coming our way. So it's been pretty challenging week for us to receive that news, but that's effectively the state of where we are with our annual report. We have the Audit and Risk Committee last week recommended that we will receive a asset revaluation in 2023, and we will look to adopt the annual report the earliest time into the new calendar year, but it will be a late adoption, and we will receive a modified audit opinion based on that issue. And we will bring the annual report back to council early in the new year.
Perhaps I can just add a couple of words around that. I met with the auditors probably a week before the Audit and Risk Committee, and was assured that everything was on track. So I want the council to know that this was in no way under our ability to succeed in terms of getting this over the line. I guess we need to be proud of our team, that they've done everything that they could to do and worked really, really hard to get to a point of success. And in my mind, we're undermined by that late notice.
So I think, yeah, it's, on the one hand, we do have to accept the auditor's opinion, and they've made a, decision that, in their view, it does sit outside of their materiality in terms of the variance of the valuation. So we do have to accept that and work with them now to just adopt the annual report as early as we can and take it on the chin, I suppose. But that's sort of the situation, the status of the annual report. It's unfortunate, and no one wants to receive a modified audit opinion or adopt their annual report late. But I think we just accept it, and we'll move on, and we'll bring the annual report back to council early in the calendar year. And is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that the option to, in order to gain a clean audit opinion, would have been to do a full revaluation of our Three Waters assets. Now that could have taken up to another 6 months, because most of the valuers out there are tied up, so it would take months to get a valuer to do it. And then there's a lot of work involved once they've done their part for us and the finance team to redo all of the financials. So we would have probably ended up adopting the annual report at the end of this financial year we're in now, and put a lot more stress on the team. So that was taken into consideration as part of the discussion that the Audit and Risk Committee had when we were going through the options. And just did want to also point out that we did talk to our auditors earlier this year about our Three Waters revaluation. We generally, we do under our accounting policies, revalue our Three Water assets every 3 years, and we're not due to revalue them again until next year. We talked to audit about that earlier this year, and we did a desktop exercise to get a bit of a gauge on what the movement might be for those assets, and it came within the materiality threshold that audit had at that point in time. So we proceeded on that basis and didn't undertake a full revaluation, and then it wasn't until just a week before, just before the Audit and Risk Committee, that it was brought to our attention by audit that they'd looked at the unit rates for these assets, compared them to the rates that were coming in from other councils that they had recently audited, and they appeared to be quite a bit lower. And so that was one of the triggers for them to dive deeper into it and recommend that we undertake a full revaluation.
I think it's even worth sort of thinking about in previous years, up until sort of prior to COVID, the legislative timeline to adopt your annual report was 31 October, wasn't it? And in recent years, I've pushed it out to 31st of December. So even that sort of reflects on, one, the complexity of the work that we're doing around sort of the reform in Three Waters, and even the work that needs to be done, but two, the capacity and resourcing restraints of Audit New Zealand. So they've retained this sort of the variation in terms of their own deadlines to 31 December because they've got so many resourcing issues internally. So, in previous years, you would have your annual report and your financials all done and dusted by the 31st of October, which would allow you to sort of get on with your annual plan and get on into the next year. So even now, it's already sort of, pushed out to the 31st of December, which makes it challenging to then get on into your next year's planning. So, yeah, it's just a sign of the times, I think, in terms of how hard it is to get through these processes. So, thoughts to the team and, give our support, I guess, to the, to the organisation, to the corporate planning and the finance team who have to sort of wrangle working with the auditors and to get through these legislative processes, because it is getting harder and harder to navigate and get out the other side. But, we'll get there.
Thanks very much, Jess and Caroline. And just, I would like to comment that there was, quite a lengthy discussion around this with the Audit and Risk Committee, and ultimately the priority for us was the wellbeing of our staff, and putting that additional pressure on them to have to do a complete rework of the annual report was just completely unacceptable, certainly as far as I was concerned, and that was unanimously supported by the committee. So unfortunate that we do end up with a modified audit opinion, but ultimately it's our staff come first. So that was what drove that decision and the recommendations that we have in front of us from the Audit and Risk Committee. So, Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just through the chair, what's the costs involved with the revaluation of our three waters? What will it cost us to do that?
So to engage a valuer,
Yep.
could be looking to get them to do that whole exercise, $20,000 to $30,000 in valuation fees, and then additional staff time to bring all of that information into the report.
Yeah. But through the chair, for something that may not even be ours in the very near future. I'm sorry you guys have got caught up in central politics.
And noting that next year was when we were scheduled to do it anyway, so that will be progressing, because at that point in time there won't have been that transition to the other entity. Councillor Taylor.
There seems to be a propensity around the country for these late audit reports. I don't think we're the only one. So was there any consideration by Audit and Risk given to communicating our dissatisfaction to the Auditor General? Because, the officers have indicated that they discussed this previously, had indications, and then to be, blindsided a week out is totally unacceptable. And I think we as a council should show our displeasure. So
I think they are aware of our displeasure.
Pretty obvious. But
have we formally written? That's what I'm asking.
I think we could. We usually ask for we are usually asked for feedback at the completion of the audit in terms of the performance of the auditor and the director. So we could do that at the completion. I think we'll wait for our audit opinion and then provide our feedback would be my suggestion.
Change. Well, it's modified and could go lower.
We'll make sure we receive one first.
I think it was fair to say, Karen, the auditor definitely felt our displeasure on the day.
I think Richard made it quite clear. He was very displeased.
Yeah. Councillor Brown.
We talked about the risks and the consequences of our assets being undervalued in the meeting, and sort of the biggest consequence that stuck out to me is our assets being undervalued when we do our depreciation of the assets being undervalued, is that when we do the depreciation, we might not depreciate enough. So we discussed asking you to index our depreciation, and I don't understand how that happens, and I'm not asking you to tell me, but I'm just wondering, is that something that you go, oh yeah, we can do that, or have we inadvertently sent you down a rabbit hole and asked you to do something that's complicated or something?
The latter, the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's in relation to the 22-23 annual plan in terms of how we're actually going to deal with the depreciation on that.
Well, also, as part of that exercise, we'd be taking into account an assumption on our capital delivery, so how much we will be actually capitalising from this year.
Okay. So that's a process to be worked through, and obviously, unfortunately, the revaluation won't be finished in time for the 22-23 annual plan, so we'll just have to do the best we can, yeah.
Do we need to have a look? I can't quite remember what the recommendation or the resolution in audit and risk said then, because I just don't want to
It didn't refer to
fail.
Can't change it now.
anything in terms of the 22-23 annual plan. Appropriate allowance, actually, sorry, will be made for increased asset values in the annual plan. So we'll have to work through what that looks like.
Yeah. And that's okay. Okay, cool.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. Just on a slightly different matter, I was reading through the agenda and the minutes of audit and risk, and I was initially confused why there was an update paper on the legal proceedings, which had been concluded in 2019 and 2020. Am I correct in thinking that statement at the very bottom of the minutes where I think it's Brian who says this is our biggest risk to council in terms of financial exposure around issuing COCs in the regulatory department? Is that the purpose of why that paper was brought?
I'm not sure what he was referring to in terms of I don't think that was the context around that comment in terms of the biggest risk.
Right.
I think he might have meant it in terms of the biggest risk around that particular issue.
Well, he says council's greatest risk in terms of exposure to litigation against us was in the regulatory space and issuing consents, carrying out inspections. And
On that
issuing
building, I think he was referring to.
Right.
I can speak to this, so that, and this is, obviously when you're just getting the minutes, you'd need to refer to the,
I read the agenda paper.
Available for PX?
No,
No.
Yes,
We probably, yeah, it is.
We can provide you
Yeah,
the report.
I've read the minutes and the report, but it's all related to an update on proceedings that all say they were completed in 2019, 2020.
No, so
There's
there
an
was an
appeal on
update
that.
on the risk pool appeal, which is in play, which we won the last to the Court of Appeal,
Yes.
and now risk pool are appealing to the Supreme Court.
That's right.
So that is, you'll remember there was a component of that particular claim that was not related to weather tightness issues, and we have won the last court appearance, but it's going to set a significant precedent for risk pool, so I
It
can
will.
understand
Yes,
why
and-
they're
Right.
now taking it that next
I
step.
do
Yeah.
have an update on that too, as risk pool is winding up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Came
that
in
just further
yesterday.
complicates matters.
So we're just trying to find out what the impact of that is at the moment, and we'll let you know. Yeah.
One would assume we become a creditor and will be in a list of creditors and may or may not get any sort of payout.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, that was helpful.
And
Councillor Brown.
just his comment was made quite generally in terms of our biggest litigation risk as a council is because we sign it off and because of the last man standing policy. So that was the context.
Any further questions about any of the three PX reports? Right, so again, I'm happy to move from the chair. We have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Look, again, I just want to say thank you, Caroline, Jess, and to your whole team. I know that it's been an incredibly stressful time, and we were all very disappointed to get that news from the auditors the day before the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. So just onwards and upwards. Yeah. Councillor Brown?
No.
Any other speakers? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll move back into open. Are we? Yeah, okay. So can I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Crown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And we'll move back into open. We'll need to get Ben back in and...
5-minute break.
Yeah, let's have a 5-minute break.
Yeah, toilet.
Yeah, I knew that was.
Yeah, yeah.
Just when you're on the cusp of winning.
I know. Well, we still won. We just mean we don't get any money.
That's what it's about, though. We wouldn't have done it.
I know.
But Audit New Zealand. And they got back to us and they were saying, we don't think you've valued your three quarters assets you've
Yes. When I saw Carl Good Games' name there,
What's that?
when I saw that Carl Good Games' name there, I didn't.
Read a bit higher, so they can put more money against them.
Will you be able to
Three
stream
wood, three.
the meeting on Facebook, on the council's Facebook page? Not this part, but
And this is the sort of problem.
Did you guys get a letter from a child at Medieval School?
The other issue is we need to have accurate valuations because things depreciate.
Oh, yeah.
So you
Have to go in there
can't-
because
it's
seriously.
not worth as much this year as it was last. So
Because it was handwritten, and it was about being an environmental warrior, and they want an environmental,
stop or we'll have to
you know, they've got an yeah, and I know that we've looked at doing a joint thing when we look at a, you know, we were looking at solution potentially out of Alto. Maybe looking at an worm farm in Chile, but
I've heard it's going or stopping.
Well, yeah, they said, we don't believe you valued it right. We'll do for a bit. You know, if we did it 3 years ago, it won't be accurate anyway. But you can't
Used to be
revalue
the
it
man
properly.
was sort of sitting up there and this guy with the
So you say, well, we'll do this, yeah. But we're going, if we're going,
I think they
Actually reselling it, and I've had
it's like almost.
Well, I do hope that they do make present, you know, it's good for us to.
yeah, I know that they do that with Botany and stuff. They do actually look at some of that at the transfer station,
Spend 30,000.
you'd like, but,
pit crew.
yeah, but actually making it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That goes.
Remember when we had that
Over that road again.
shop and Cam was presenting and we looked at that and we talked about the joint thing and maybe the likes of something where they can have reasonable. And it was also talking about food.
Well, it's,
Food scraps came
because
up,
I'm on Odinary, I'm
the viability of doing
really interesting.